Hello students, welcome to another episode of this special podcast done by New Alipore College, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. Well, now that we are clear on what is to be studied in the unit concerning communication, now that we have understood what definition of communication really is, it can be interesting to know a little about the types and forms of communication. Now, as we already know that communication has been classified into several types of communication. Say, for example, verbal communication, non-verbal communication, technological communication, non-technological communication, mediated communication, non-mediated communication, participatory form of communication, non-participatory, and so on. It is here at this point of time that it becomes important to understand what may be the forms of communication, depending on the number of people interacting and also other factors. The first form of communication that we are discussing is intrapersonal communication. Now, intrapersonal communication is individual reflection, contemplation, or meditation. Transcendental meditation, for instance, is an example of such communication. Conversing with the divine, with spirits and ancestors, may be termed as transpersonal communication. This is a vital experience in the religious and monastic life and in ashrams and places of prayer. Point 2. Interpersonal or face-to-face communication. Interpersonal communication is direct face-to-face communication between two people. It is, in other words, a dialogue or conversation that is happening without the intervention of any other person or a machine, like maybe the telephone, mobile phone we mean, and any other maybe mediated forms of communication. In this case, interpersonal communication is personal, direct, and intimate, and it allows for maximum interaction and exchange in this world of communication, which involves a lot of gesture and verbal words. Indeed, it is the highest and most perfect form of communication that two people can engage in, this interpersonal face-to-face communication. It is more persuasive and influential than any other type of communication. Now, interpersonal communication, when we are talking about these stages, we have to understand that there is a fatigue stage. Fatigue stage is the initial exploratory stage of communication that determines the course conversation will take place. This first stage is known as the fatigue phase. The second phase that we are talking of is the personal stage. The second stage, called the personal stage, introduces a more personal element into the conversation. During this period, we generally lower our social guard a little and are prepared to take some risks in exposing ourselves and our feelings to the person we are talking to. The third kind of stage that we are talking of is the intimate stage. This stage is reserved strictly for friends and relatives. The degree of intimacy depends upon the closeness of the relationship. The third type of communication, or the form of communication that we are discussing, is group communication. Group communication shares all the qualities of interpersonal face-to-face communication, but in a less measure. The larger the group, the less personal and intimate is the possibility of exchange. In fact, as the group grows in size, communication tends to become more and more of a monologue. Say, for example, what we get to see in maybe a procession or a rally or a political walk or something like that. The bigger the number of the group, the lesser maybe is the interaction that is there. Now communication becomes more or less of a monologue. Participation becomes problematic here. The degree of directness and intimacy therefore depends upon the size of the group. Well, if we move on to the fourth kind of communication, the form of communication, the fourth form that we are talking of, we will be talking about mass communication. It is, remember, a mediated communication. Group communication, you can say in a way, has been extended by the tools of mass communication. Say, for example, books, press, cinema, radio, television, video on demand, internet. So, dear students, these were the forms of communication, and definitely, I am sure you must be wondering, what is it about mass communication? Well, that is reserved for another episode of the podcast that we are doing at New Alipore College, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. Stay tuned to our podcast to know more on mass communication and what it is all about, what are the functions really like. But for that, you have to listen to the next podcast.